Hi, I'm Amir Bagheri.
And I'm Shamila Khan
We are Art Magazine.
for TAF Open Access.
So I'm a campaigning specialist, an activist, and a writer when time allows. I spend a lot of time consuming and creating, I think, art. That's what I really enjoy doing the most in my free time.
I'm a documentary filmmaker, a researcher. I was working in the academic space for a little bit, but now I'm sort of finding my own creative space within documentary, script writing, some art. I'm also an activist. I run an NGO. Odd was founded in 2016, and initially it was founded as a kind of literary blog, I'd say. And then we would have like 5 readers at the time. It was very young. And then as time went by, since then, we've really expanded. And now we're a multimedia, multidisciplinary art magazine, digital art magazine. And we specialize in all sorts of things like poetry, short stories, film, reviews, you name it. It's a very fluid space. And we're in about how many
160.
countries? 160 countries.
Yeah.
We have about 5,000 readers now a month from 5, which is great. Sometimes more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7,000, 8,000 sometimes.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And that's odd.
Initially, before we launched art in 2016, a year before that in 2015, my friend and I were kind of experiencing a big gap in the South African arts and literature sector. We realized that a lot of the content that was out there was not necessarily reflective of what Afro-millennials or African millennials had to, showcase for themselves, for their generation, for what they were dealing with. Him and I both decided to go on this journey of researching whether there is a platform that showcases young people's work in this region to a much larger global audience. And no matter how hard we looked, no matter how much research we did, we couldn't find a platform that was truly representative and truly accessible. And I think one of the major things we deal with in South Africa is that arts and culture are not accessible to the general public. It's a very upper middle class, rich thing. It's beyond me. It's bizarre, really, when you think about it, because when you go to other countries, art and culture is very much accessible. And in South Africa, that wasn't the case. So our thinking with art was to make art accessible, not only to consumers, but also creators as well. And that was really the thinking behind it. We wanted to bridge that gap.
A space where young writers or first-time writers who were struggling to get published could find a space to be published. With some really good editing advice.
Initially, as I said, in the early stages of art did not necessarily have a very large readership. In its first few months, as Shamila said, we were going from 5 to 50, and we were not really going beyond that. And I think that was when Shamila joined as like a full-time contributor as well. She had contributed before, but she was like, you know what, to kind of take this to the next level, we need to be consistent, we need to have better editing eyes on our pieces. And I was over the moon, because at that time art was just sitting in my hands, and I was definitely not capable enough as a one-man team to run art. So when Shamila joined, I think she brought with herself a level of I think professional approach to just arts and culture magazine. And we became a lot more consistent. So we went from a platform that published on irregular basis to a magazine that published issues on the first of every month consistently. And I think it was that really contributed to people being more engaged and engaging with the different themes that we've been coming up with since I think 2017 onwards.
We generally have a team meeting and we discuss a theme. And that's always really nice fun, because it's kind of like, where are you at? What are you feeling? Say words, which is also kind of exploratory for us. You'd think that it would be really difficult to just find a theme, but for 5 years, we've found themes quite easily. Once we settle on a theme, we basically put our call out. At first, I'd have to be like an art investigator, because I'd have to be like, hi, I can't pay you anything, but like, please submit, send something. And so at first there was just this, like, I've become really good at it. I'm an art hustler, basically. If you need to find someone, I'm your girl. I was gathering like 12 pieces at a time. Amir would always be like, it's quality over quantity. And I'm like, it's both. We finalize all the pieces. I'll head edit it. We'll do a couple of edits. We'll have a back and forth with the creatives. We do everything from call out to format on websites. We keep everything running as our team. We're like a team of 5, I think.
Yeah, and the last few days of the month are really crazy for us. So
yeah,
we are managing each other's emails and WhatsApps. So
from the 25th onwards, you just need all the stamina. We work late nights.
Yeah.
Just pulling it together.
Yeah.
To make sure it's.
Yeah, it's a lot of work that people don't see. People think they submit and then it just magically disappears as this beautiful art piece online, but no, a lot of work goes into it, from editing to finding the right imagery and colors that represent the pieces. And it's a fun process. But really draining sometimes.
We also have our work outside of art.
Yeah.
So we're managing art, we're doing our work, we're collaborating with other people. Those people are doing their own thing.
But it's amazing. It's like a spider web that always feeds into the core values of art.
In the beginning, it was mostly just poetry and short stories. And then we thought, well, how else can we make this magazine breathe and live in a different kind of way? We've created such interesting possibilities where anyone can share their work on art, as opposed to it just being a kind of literary space. It's moved. And I think that happened with that structural shift. Our themed base, what do we find people want to talk about in this particular month, what's happening in the world? And that allowed us, I think, to move into a bit of like socio-political commentary. I'm a believer that the personal is political, and I think at art, people can talk about their context, their communities or historical backgrounds in a way that's very much like premised on storytelling. And the personal story is what we want. That really speaks to an audience. And I think that's what people love about art, is that it's personal. We want to have more possibilities for conversation, for creative conversation. And I think that's why we're looking at podcasts. That's why we're looking at having our own little productions where we can film and really interview people and get to know artists in a more intimate way through this conversation. We're also looking at multimedia in the sense of like, can we have a possibility of a small press, or can we actually contribute in those tangible ways to the creative economy?
There are those more idealistic dreams as well. I always say that we want to be one of the driving forces, one of the pioneers of African art and culture going through its like proper prosperous Renaissance experience. And I think like every region of the world has had that, where their culture, their art becomes the dominant or the hegemonic voice of global arts and culture. And Africa hasn't had that yet. And I think we are at that crucial part within this region. For example, music, you're looking at how Afrobeats is like taking over the world. When you look at cinema, you see more and more representation of African film, you know, being showcased at a global scale. And I think we are at that crucial part where African arts and culture, or African artists in general, can contribute on a more kind of like hegemonic scale. And I want art to be a part of that. The people that showcase the artwork, I want us to be the people that actually organizes and facilitates like, you know, big events where we are exhibiting art, where we are exhibiting movies or films, or where we are exhibiting like, you know, paintings and storytelling and poetry. Wherever that takes us, we are open to it, whether it's amazing like, you know, online TV channel, or like a record label, or like some sort of a podcast radio station.
Art is that space, especially for me in my background, where I can actually live out and have sort of published or have a space to be heard. As a Muslim woman of color in South Africa, seeing myself in work was very limited for a really long time. Actually, when I reached out to Amir to be a part of art, it was because I started seeing myself in this magazine. And I started seeing a lot of people like me as well, just trying to navigate their own personal space and community. As artists, we really want to have others see our work and be able to make the kind of work we want to wake up and make. And I think that's why art is so special. We have worked a little bit in the industry. I have worked on other projects, but I've never experienced this kind of collaboration on like a micro level as well as like a macro level, collaborating and in conversation with our team, who are all phenomenal beings and artists. And then at the same time, I can speak to someone who's made work from India because of that curation process and that collaborative process. We kind of also do exchanges. So I'm like, hey, you're an artist, you want to get your work seen, I want to publish something. How about you put your art up on the website and put the value of the art on there? And we've had artists sell their work through
our
us,
platform,
through the Odd Artists of the Month. So every month we try and profile an artist, local artist preferably, a person of color, and then we try and get their work sold through us, and we offer that space.
I think the story of art and like my own discipline of work is a personal one. I grew up in a rather conservative, like Middle Eastern household where art and culture was not really encouraged for many reasons. You know, whether you're trying to look at it from a religious point of view or a cultural point of view, art was not something that was as highly regarded as other disciplines of work. But I was so in tune with music, with stories, but that was never supported. That was never encouraged, and I was constantly forced to follow a different path. And I basically was more or less channeled into my second areas of passion, which was social development and human rights and kind of giving back to the community that you belong. And that's a route I went in my academia, in my field of work. But the thought of doing art or contributing to that always lingered, you know, in my heart and in my mind. But I see how that desire has contributed so much to me becoming a better artist. Not only as a producer of like stories or, you know, mixtapes or playlists, but rather also I have that lens of what is it that people want to hear or read. And at the same time, how can we give it a global narrative that then becomes reflective? I think ultimate goal for both Shamila and I is to like do this full time. I think after 10 years of experience in that like sector, I'm ready. As days go by, we're getting closer and closer to that like breakthrough moment. We can smell it.
It's just there like teasing us like, yes, we want to.
Yeah. We want it to be good. We want it to be perfect, but we want it to be odd. We want to create a blueprint of our own, a Magna Carta of some sort that people can refer to at a later stage. I've been working within that space, within the artivism space since 2014. It's roughly 7 years now. And I'm constantly thinking about how can social issues or social development in general become more appealing to the masses, right? And the easiest way oftentimes, and we forget about this, is through the arts. It is through a good mural, a painting, a song, a story. And many campaigners, especially in my field of work, oftentimes forget that. They get lost in this kind of like professional, academic kind of lingo that mass majority of people don't speak that language. And therefore, we need to be able to make it as accessible as possible, no matter how serious the issues are, whether it's climate change, racism, sexism, you know, any form of oppression. We are able to create a value-based narrative. And I learned a lot of those skills through art.
Creating spaces of healing through art is so important when it comes to activist work. Art and all the other things that I do, they're interchangeable in a very organic way, I have to say, because I've always been in the creative art space. I was in a very academic space before. I've been working as a lecturer, but I was working at an arts institution. Even there, it's about how research, critical thinking, decolonial thought, and art all kind of are in conversation with each other. And so art is a kind of lived reality for me, because I've always wanted to be in these kind of spaces. I've never worked in a corporate space. I've only ever worked in the creative space with creators. Even in my very academic sort of work, I look at the personal meets memory meets archive. So even then, I'm really like rooted in storytelling and personal narratives. So art is really just a dream job for me. I love it. so important that decolonization doesn't just happen in theory. How are we decolonizing is important on every single level in the company. Working with people of color, favoring people of color's stories, and really looking at like how are we contributing to this decolonial South African model, which I think is so important in South Africa to have the conversation. What is it that we're talking about when we say, how is this company decolonizing? That's how myself and Tazib, we also operate in this level. Her research as well as my research is very much premised on this. We literally discuss almost every single piece and why we've chosen it, what it represents. Ethnographic representation, what does that mean? Colonial context, why are we selecting this person's work? All of those little things, I think, is a part of this very real conversation that I think we should be having all the time. And Odd is very like big on that. We call each other out all the time. We never tiptoe around conversations that are uncomfortable, because even at a kind of structural, or I hate the word managerial level, we still follow that politic. For example, if we're in a meeting and there's a woman of color speaking, that's her space. You're not going to interrupt, you're not going to speak over. So for me, decolonization is number one. Of course, it exists in our work. And in South Africa, it's particularly like interesting, like what does it mean? Because we're such a multicultural, multiracial space, and we all have such different narratives. But in Odd specifically, we're very much premised on that, is that this is a part of our value system. It's a part of our DNA, that we are decolonial, that we are intersectional, and that we are inclusive.
I'm interested about the conversation of, decolonial art and just decolonial, I think, academics from a more academic point of view. No matter how hard I try to look at it, no matter how much literature I read from this region, I still find it very easy to problematize the decolonial movement for one simple reason. People who are actively involved in the decolonial movement still use the methods or the methodology of the former colonial powers. We're constantly very mindful as to how we are representing not only this country but the region as a whole, because we're very mindful that we have a global audience as well, and we are really, really careful not to create or recreate the same problematic narratives.
And so that we are these people outside and inside of Odd.
Yes.
But being aware of our own position, taking into consideration that there are privileges that exist and how they exist. And so we've never just been editors of pieces. We've been editors of people, their histories, their story, their backgrounds. I really encourage when writers or anyone submits to us that they include a bit of their backgrounds, because all of this is important. For those of us who are really passionate about decolonial work, every single person matters,
When you try and look at art from its beginning days in February 2016 up until now, it's been nothing but a collaborative platform. Nobody expects any kind of monetary return for it, but we hope that we can basically, reimburse everybody's, contributions and skills. And we really do hope that we get to a stage where we can make sure that no artist is struggling. I hate the term struggling artist. It really, really hurts me.
That's our number one goal, because people should be paid. People should be paid. As someone who's working in this industry, I want to be paid. And so I know what that's like. But I'm so thankful to everyone who constantly submits to us and supports us. I noticed that a little bit of the mentorship does happen in the editing phases, because I had the privilege of studying creative writing, and so I noticed just how important mentorship or having a supervisor as an editor is. You can have really good writers, but they just don't understand how to edit, to craft. That's how we really built up our brand of working with people. We do take the time to send that little email that says, hey, this is good, but here's other ways, submit again. There's always a possibility for publishing with us. It's never like this kind of elitist thing where you have to already have been published before to publish with us. I mean, we've we did a youth issue, only youth led. I mean, we had a 14-year-old publish with us. And so with that kind of space where we genuinely want to work with the youth and mentor the youth, and we are a young creative space ourselves.
There's also been that peer-to-peer mentorship. These past few years has been a constant like peer-to-peer support and growth. I've become a much better writer because of this team.
Me too.
Yeah,
we mentor each other, which is great. I feel very held by the people in my team.
Yeah.
And when there is something I can do better, they're like, we're giving you 2 days to resubmit. I mean, I just don't get a free pass, because I'm I have to submit to the editor myself. And she is brilliant. It isn't just this thing you read once a month. It's something that is living and breathing. And that's what we really want to change in the sort of African renaissance of arts.